Is this a major step forward in the prevention of knife crime, or is it a bit of a pointless gimmick designed for political advantage that isn't really going to make any difference? Now, I won't tell you what to think. You can decide what to think based on what I discuss in this video. But today, you're going to see your newsfeed fill up with the news that they've banned ninja swords. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, what is a ninja sword? If you want to go deep into the history of it, I can recommend Matt Easton here on YouTube. I'll link his video below because it's not really a ninja sword as such. It was called a ninjato, which is a straight-bladed sword. More on the history of it on Matt Easton's channel. And if you want more on the history of the ninja, wait till the very end of this video with my learned friend Alan Robert Shaw talking about kabuki theatre and the origin of the dress, the outfit, and so on. But I digress. Let's look at what they are actually banning and whether there's any point to this ban at all. So most of you will be familiar with what a sword generally looks like. Let me pull up some diagrams here. This is the official guidance on the ban of ninja swords. Now these, what you see on screen, are what they're referring to as ninja swords. Whereas you go further down here, you can see these are zombie knives or machetes. And the bottom one here is the traditional katana or samurai sword. Now, there are differences between them, and the law applies differently between them. So this law, new law, specifically from today, is banning the ninja sword, this one here. But let's have a look at what specifically is being banned here. So let's zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. So it is a sword whose blade length is at least 14 inches. So let's take a look at this. So it has to be at least that long to come under this definition. So if it's, let's say, that long, the blade, it won't qualify. So it won't be banned if it's that long as opposed to that long. But next, it's got to be no more than 24 inches, the length of the blade being the straight line distance between the top of the handle and the tip of the blade. So using a selfie stick here, if this was the handle and this is the top of the handle there, holding that there, that's the tip of the blade. That is now 24 inches. So no more than 24 inches, and it won't qualify under this ban. So this would qualify under the ban if this were a ninja sword per the description, which I'll show you in a minute. That would be banned, but that would not be. So just a smidgen over 24 inches, and that is no longer banned under this specific ban. Now, as I say, there are other laws, and for the avoidance of doubt, it is illegal to go out in public with a blade in a public place without good reason, etc. And this, we're talking about specific bans on specific things here. So they are banned to own even in private. I'll link all the guidance below. Do go and have a look at it. This is a broad overview of what we're talking about here. But between 14 inches, which is that, and 24 inches, which is just shorter than that, which I just showed you, but outside of those limits, and it no longer qualifies under the ban. So coming back to the definition of a ban, it's at least 14 inches, not more than 24 inches, has a primary straight cutting edge, a secondary straight cutting edge, which I'll show in a minute, a blunt spine, and either a tanto style or a reverse tanto style. No, that's quite straightforward when you actually see it. Now, when you see these straight bladed swords here, this is a primary straight cutting edge, the sharp bit at the bottom, the secondary straight cutting edge, which is this bit at the very end here, and a blunt spine, and a tanto style point or reverse tanto. And they're also very specific about the angles of the point of these swords as well. So this bit between this sharp edge of the blade here and the secondary sharp edge here has got to be more than 90 degrees. And then the angle between that second cutting edge here and the blunt spine has got to be less than 90 degrees. That makes it a tanto style. Now, if you reverse those, such as the diagram here, that's a reverse tanto. And so tanto and reverse tanto points are both covered. However, you can see on this typical katana or samurai sword here, this has a point with a gradual curve at the very end of it. So for example, using this image here, this one has a very gradual curve up to the point. This would not qualify as a tanto because it is not a double cutting edge thing with the angles that they talk about. This is just a curved edge. But then some people will pop up and say, well, these are banned anyway. Well, that I'll come back to in a moment. because aside from this being a straightforward ban, there are still defenses available, because these types of sword, the curved katana swords, are already prohibited save where there is a defense available. And even in the consultation, they said that most of the defenses should apply, save that the religious exemption does not apply to these ninja swords under this new ban. But that said, the defenses are broadly explained here, and the full word is in the legislation, which I'll show you some of in a moment. The defenses include where possession is for the purposes of functions carried out on behalf of the Crown or visiting force. The weapon is one of historical importance, where it's in a person's possession, capacity, or operator, a person acting on behalf of a museum or gallery. Educational purposes only, for the purpose of making it available for theatrical performances, films, etc., where possession is for the purposes of making the weapon available for or participating in a permitted activity, such as historical reenactment or sporting activity, etc. The one at the bottom, where the weapon in question is blunt, and this is the important one that I want to draw attention to here, where the weapon was made by hand. Because if we look at the new law that's in force from today, as it applies to ninja swords, this will give you an idea as to why I think this is really frustrating, specifically for members of the public to understand law, because without guidance or without legal advice, it is, with respect, quite impossible for some people to really understand what this means. Now, this is the new law. It's the Criminal Justice Act 1988, Offensive Weapons Amendment, Surrender and Compensation, England and Wales Order 2025, because it applies at the moment just to England and Wales. This specifically applies to ninja swords. It talks about Section 141, which is the offensive weapons in the Criminal Justice Act 1988. Now, if we look all the way down to paragraph 6, this amends the Offensive Weapons Order 1998 and specifically amends paragraph 5D and says, after paragraph 1SA, insert or you. So if we go over to that order, paragraph 5D, it says that it is a defense for a person to be charged with an offense under section 1411 or 1A. Subsection 1 is manufacturing the things, and section 1A is owning the things, even in private. It's a defense under those sections in respect of conduct as it applies by virtue of paragraph 1SA, which is the zombie knives. It says here in the new law, insert or you. And the U is the new bit that now applies to ninja swords. So we go back down to paragraph 5D. It is a defense for a person to be charged under section 141 if the item is made by hand. So again, we come back to section 141 of the Criminal Justice Act 1988. Subsection 1, any person who manufactures, sells, hires, offers for sale, etc. is guilty of an offence. Or 1A, any person who possesses a weapon to which the section applies in private is guilty of an offence under that section. And that applies to that list of items unless, as per 5D applies, it was made by hand. And this was also clarified by the response, the government response to the consultation that said as follows. The government has carefully considered the comments about defences put forward by respondents. Our intention is to provide defences for ninja swords that are made by hand, are antiques, historical importance, used in permitted activities, reenactment, or where the blade is blunt. And as it happens, there is a similar yet very specific defense available to samurai swords. I've been asked this question many times before, and a similar defense exists. Because under the legislation that prohibits the samurai swords and other things, the Criminal Justice Act 1988, Offensive Weapons Order 1988, does include a long list of things that are banned already here, such as knuckle dusters, sword sticks, hand claws, you know, those quote ninja hand claws things, push daggers, hollow kubatans, not to be confused with normal martial art kubatans. The hollow ones are the ones that got spikes inside, but I've done another video somewhere on the kubatan itself. Shurikens, i.e. throwing stars, all these kind of things. But under R, a sword with a curved blade of 50 centimeters or over in length. And for the purposes of this paragraph, the length of the blade should be the straight line distance between the top of the handle and the tip of the blade. So even though it's curved, it takes that straight line length. However, despite these being a prohibited item, there are still defences available. The one that I think, and not just I think, I sought King's Counsel's opinion on this, far more experienced than me, on this very point, now with the caveat that it would be absolutely essential for any expert to examine the physical sword in question to make a determination, and it still might be a question open to the court. In other words, if you have one of these, you still might be prosecuted for owning it, but your defense might be, depending on the expert evidence, within this section here. So either here to show that the item in question was made before 1954, or, and this is the real key here, was made at any other time, so any time, according to traditional methods of making swords by hand. Having sought King's Counsel's opinion on that very point, it looked at the stages of making a traditional sword and whether this defense in the legislation applies. And it says here on that point, paragraph 16, the second part of the exemption applies to a sword which was made at any other time according to traditional methods of making swords by hand. Paragraph 11 above, in this opinion, describes the process involved in traditional sword making. There are 5 stages. The first is creation of the steel, the second is making the sword, and the folding and the forging. The third is tempering the shaping process. The fourth is polishing and sharpening, and the fifth is fittings of the sword. Then he goes on to say, it might be argued that in order to fulfill the requirements of the exemption, that the exempt sword must be produced as a result of all 5 stages. However, this is a superficial interpretation and one with which I do not agree. In my view, the words according to, in section 3 of the legislation, are critical. The Oxford Dictionary defines according to as including in a manner corresponding or conforming to, and it defines corresponding as having close similarity, match or agree almost exactly with, or be analogous or equivalent in character, form, function, or being similar in type or form. Thus, he goes on to say, I'm clearly of the view that if a sword has been made using methods which accord or correspond and or conform to the stages described, then it should have the benefit of that exemption. And so you can quite clearly see that whilst the law in spirit is trying to restrict ownership of these items, there are many different ways to circumvent this legislation perfectly legally. But if it happens to be made by hand, then again, you're probably fine. So, as I said, is this a major step forward in the prevention of knife crime? In my respectful view, no, it isn't, because all it does is ban a very narrow and specific type of sword, which you may argue is a good thing. I won't tell you what to think, but you may think that that is a perfectly good thing. But it is not going to make major steps forward in preventing knife crime, because the vast majority of knife crime is with something akin to a kitchen knife. Now, I've seen all sorts of arguments about making kitchen knives blunt, which again is ridiculous, because if you mandate that these kitchen knives are made with a blunt tip, it doesn't stop them from cutting, and it doesn't stop somebody from sharpening one, which is not very difficult if that's what they intend to do. In my view, criminals will always find a way around this legislation to carry something or own something legally, or they won't care at all, and they will just own it anyway, because let's not forget, it's already an offence to go out with one of these blades, unless it's something like this, which is a folding pocket knife, which is no more than 3 inches. It folds immediately at all times. It doesn't lock. And even then, there are certain places you can't go. You can't take them into court. You can't take them into schools. You can't take them into hospitals, etc. And let's face it, if you are out at night with one of these, you're likely to get nicked anyway, because why are you in the middle of wherever with a knife in the middle of the night? So you'll probably get nicked anyway, to explain why you've got it, because they might say that you're carrying it as an offensive weapon, which, by the way, carrying anything as an offensive weapon is still an offensive weapon. I could take yet another selfie stick that I've got here. I could clump this up and I could take this out, and this could be used as a weapon. If I took this out for the purposes of using it as a weapon, then my intent makes it an offensive weapon. It doesn't matter that it's just a selfie stick. These things are extendable. I mean, these are somewhat made of plastic mostly, but you could get metal ones of these, and it could act as a metal baton, which is also restricted. But as I say, criminals will either find a way around these things or they'll just ignore the law completely. Is it a major step forward? No. Is it a positive step forward? Arguably, yes and no, because for the most part, it is banning something that really no one really needs to own. But at the same time, who is it really for the government to say what you should and shouldn't own? If you own, let's say, a curved samurai sword, this is not legal advice because I'm not looking at your particular sword, but if you own a curved samurai sword, it is not automatically illegal, because if it is made at any other time according to traditional methods of making swords by hand, then you have a defense available. Just know that you might get arrested for possession of the thing, you might get charged for it, but you've possibly got a defense available for which you'll need to rely upon expert evidence based on that item, and for which I happen to know Matt Easton is one such expert. Check him out on YouTube. He's got a great deal of videos talking about swords in a great more depth than I could ever possibly purport to do. But I hope you find that interesting. It is very much a hot debate topic. And of course, what do I think the solution is? Well, stop and search is one thing. I know it's somewhat curtails freedom to an extent, but stop and search will vastly increase the detection of knives on the streets and therefore reduce the number of knife crime incidents and harsher sentences. Those are the two things, really, the only two things that are going to make the massive difference that we need to see on the streets. So I hope the powers that be of this government do take that on board from whoever says it and take action on it. And so with all that said, as I promised, a little bit from my learned friend Alan Robert Shaw from Art of Law, I'll link it below, on Kabuki Theatre. Have a listen to this, enjoy, and I'll see you next time.
So, where does the traditional ninja outfit actually come from? It's got an interesting history. Now, as some of you may know, in my misspent youth, I used to roadie for bands, used to work for bands, and ended up doing things like, you know, lighting design and sound engineering things. So I've got a bit of a professional interest in stage stuff. And that includes kabuki theatre, because we used to actually use something called a kabuki bar to rotate backdrops. But in kabuki theatre, stagehands, a bit like over here, the traditional roadie outfit is jeans, a black t-shirt and a belt with lots of jangly keys on. In Japan, stagehands would wear what we now recognise as the ninja outfit. And the convention is that if you see anybody on stage wearing that outfit, you ignore them. It's a bit like if you go see The Lion King, you know, you ignore the puppeteers and just focus on the on the puppets. So the convention was, an audience would say, I just blanked those people out. So in a play where it was about ninjas, and you wanted somebody to say, how to do the algorithm, hashashins. If somebody was to sort of disappear suddenly, or something was to happen, like an arrow was suddenly to appear in them, one of the stagehands would actually just place it in them. And the idea was, you were supposed to go, where did that come from? Well, it came from that bloke in the black outfit. No, he's not there. It came from somewhere else. So that became associated that if you ever saw the black outfit, that represented a ninja. Now, in real life, ninjas, they would do stuff. They just wear like ordinary civilian clothes and disguise themselves as gardeners and sort of take you out with a pair of shears or something. But that is why now, in the West, and indeed back in Japan, it's all sort of cross-fertilised. That's why ninjas wear those outfits.